The Sergeant Major of the Army's bio is in your flyer, in your program. I'm certainly not going to read it, but there are some things that I absolutely want to highlight. Sergeant Major of the Army Dan Dailey enlisted in the Army in 1989. He was sworn in as the 15th Sergeant Major of the Army in 2015. He was awarded the Bronze Star Medal with Valor Device in 2008 in the Battle of Sadr City. He became the TRADOC Command Sergeant Major in 2011. But long before all of that, he was a young soldier in 7th Corps. While assigned to 1st of the 15th Infantry Division, 1st of the 15th Infantry Battalion, 3rd Infantry Division, he deployed as an individual replacement. So for personnel guys, that's people sitting around waiting for a job. Individual replacement to Southwest Asia. We are pleased and thrilled to have a bona fide Jayhawk soldier with us tonight, the 15th Sergeant Major of the Army. Please join me in a great Jayhawk welcome for Sergeant Major of the Army Dan Dailey.
Thank you, and that's very humbling, and I appreciate it so much. General Griffith, fellow general officers, Colonel Retired Rado, and we got to give Colonel Rado a big round of applause for hosting us tonight. Where's he at? Great job. And I'll make sure they bring a smaller podium next year, sir. Yes, sir. But Mr. Lennox, Command Sergeant Majors, distinguished guests, friends, families, and fellow veterans, thank you for having me here tonight. I'm honored by the invitation, and it is my great privilege to speak at you at this event. Colonel Radio, thank you for the kind words in my introduction, and I know that he could not be here tonight, but I'd like to publicly thank General Retired Franks. He's the one that invited me to speak with you all tonight, and General Franks' impact on our military and our nation transcends generations. Countless soldiers and leaders throughout our force, myself included, call him a mentor, and have looked to him and his example for guidance in our own careers. And even all of these years after his retirement, he remains a steadfast steward of selfless service. Thank you for your continued support to our soldiers, their veterans, and their families. And our nation owes him a big debt of gratitude. So please join me in a round of applause, even though he's not here, for General Franks. Now I'd like to start every speech with my favorite saying. It is a great day to be a soldier. Oh. And today, just like every day, it's a great day to be a veteran of the 7th Corps and Operation Desert Shield and Storm, even if I was just an individual augmentee for a few days out in the desert. And I'm humbled and honored that you would invite me here today to speak to this distinguished group of veterans. Of course, I guess I'm the Sergeant Major of the Army, so that may have something to do with it. Right? But 26 years ago, during Desert Shield and Storm, I was just Private Dailey, a scared, barely 18-year-old skinny little kid, fresh out of high school, trying to figure out how in the hell I got myself in the middle of a desert. That's right. Oh, and by the way, where there was a war going on. And if you knew me then, and you probably are trying to figure out how in the hell I became the Sergeant Major of the Army. But don't worry, you're not alone. Because for the last 2 years, as the Sergeant Major of the Army, I've been trying to figure that out myself. Which leads me to a short story I'd like to share with you, if you don't mind. When I travel around, people usually not associated with the military, they ask me, what does the Sergeant Major of the Army do? And I get that question a lot, and I don't think I've ever answered it appropriately, because it's really tough to define, what you do as a Sergeant Major of the Army. Of course, the Chief has me do a lot of things. And, what really reminded me of what I do is when I called my mother the other night, and she's a devout Catholic, a great woman. She goes to church and sings in the choir, and she goes to prayer meeting. But this week, it was special when I called her. She said, son, I need to tell you a story. She said, I was at prayer meeting, and when I walked in, there was 3 guest speakers for the prayer group this week at the church. She said, and they came there to talk about their devotion to God in the church. And the first one stood up and she said, talked about her devotion to God. And when she ended, she said, my son is a priest, and I'm proud of that. And when he walks in a room, they call him father. And everybody said, oh, great. The next woman stood up. She talked about her life and service to God in the church, and she ended with the fact that her son was a bishop. And when people walked in the room, they called him Your Excellency. And then the last woman stood up and said, well, I want to talk about my devotion to the church and God. And she said, I'm also a proud mother of someone serving the church, and he is a cardinal. And when he walks in the room, they call him Your Excellency. So finally, I went around the room till it was my mom's turn to talk about her devotion to God in the church, and she talked about that. And she said, my son also serves. And they said, oh, where does he serve in the church? No, he doesn't serve the church. He serves our nation. He's a soldier. They said, well, what does he do in the Army? She goes, I have no idea. He's a sergeant major of the Army, but when he walks in the room, they say, oh, my God. Yeah. So that's what the sergeant major of the Army does. At least in my mom's words. And Mom never lies. But I am very honored to be here. And I can tell you that, how I got here today was not luck. I was fortunate. Fortunate because in the very beginning, I was mentored by some of the best our Army had to offer. In the 80s and early 90s, as you all know, it was a time of change in the Army. A time in the Army where the leaders decided that we had enough and it was time to be ready. Ready for whatever the world presented us. A time where standards, discipline, and training were on the rise. And you remember those days, right? Well, let me give you from a private's point of view during that time. It started off in the early morning. We got up and we started pressing our BDUs, spit shining our black boots, getting ready for morning room inspection, all before PT even started. And then following PT session, a normal day consisted of weeding the sidewalk with my E-tool, GI parties in the barracks, buffing the floors on staff duty and CQ, sweeping the motor pool, and the occasional looking for the box of grid squares. Yeah, that was me, by the way. Oh, my favorite memory of the time I was a private in the early 90s was finding that I didn't like hospitals anymore. And you're probably thinking, well, no, it's not because of the needles or the medicine. It's because the hospitals, on their beds, they had corners. And the first sergeant decided he liked that. So he made us have corners on our beds, too. So those are some of the funny things we did as a private. But what I really remembered, seriously, what sticks out in my mind the most is that in the early 90s, we were good. We were damn good. That was not by chance. It is because we had great leaders. Leaders that a decade previously had set us on the right path to become the best trained, manned, and equipped Army the world had ever known. We trained hard. We listened to our leaders, and every once in a while, we played hard too. But I wish I could convey to you just how truly humbled I am to be here tonight and be considered a brother among all of you, those leaders at that time. Your legacy speaks for itself. You were the tip of the spear of a 35-nation coalition. The tactical and technical might you projected and the left hook you gave the guy standing on the wrong side of the line in that desert sand there. The pure dominance put on display by the 7th Corps during that month of ground combat, it's sheerly indisputable. And quite honestly, our success then has a lot to do with why our adversaries have not waged regular warfare against our Army today. It's hard to imagine that almost 26 years ago, that was the first day of my combat experience. No clue what I was getting into. I'd been stationed in Germany for all 6 weeks in the 1st Battalion, 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd ID, Rock of the Marne. And before making my way to the desert, I was nervous, happy, scared, excited, confused, any emotion you could think of. I could probably experienced it in the first week that I was there. But after all, in only 8 months, I'd graduated from high school, became an infantryman, PCS to Germany, found myself assembled in Saudi Arabia and getting ready to stand toe-to-toe with the Republican Guard. My short time there made an impact on my life and career that very few people will ever understand. My experience there with all of you helped build the foundation in me for what has become a proud career as a mechanized infantryman, and what I've learned in Iraq in 1991 and what I learned from your generation shaped my ability to be successful and take care of soldiers years later in combat. Certain memories and people, moments, of course, stick out a little more than others, but combat is certainly one of those experiences that is like no other. Soldiers in combat form a bond that is unimaginable. Unimaginable by those who have never had the privilege of experiencing it. And that's what you all are to me. You were with me the first time I truly felt what it meant to serve my country, selflessly and willingly, ready to lay it all on the line in the name of peace and sovereignty. And although I was nervous, happy, scared, and excited, and confused, I was confident. Confident because I knew we were well equipped, we were well trained, well manned, but most of all, I was well led. Nobody knew the ground war was going to last a month. No one knew it would end that soon. But in the eyes of a young private, and frankly, in the eyes of the rest of the world, what you accomplished was nothing short of precision. A synchronized execution of a well-planned mission carried out by some of the finest war-fighting individuals ever assembled. And in just a few short months, you liberated the nation, defeated the fourth largest military in the world, delivered a devastating blow to the tyranny, and restored a sense of unity and patriotism in our own nation. And most of all, we reassured our allies and the rest of the world that America will not stand in the shadows and allow innocent people to be oppressed. Never again. And all of you here, as well as so many others who could be here tonight, many of whom we were honored early in the memorial ceremony today, the men and women of 7th Corps and in the Army during that time, helped us all become the Army and the nation we are today. I like to think that my parents instilled in me the values necessary to succeed as a soldier and a leader. But it was soldiers like General Frank, General Rame, Staff Sergeant Davis, First Sergeant Julius Tate, and so many others of that time who empowered us to be leaders at such a young age. Your generation gave us the latitude to make mistakes and to learn from them. Such a volatile time in our nation's history. But that, to me, is one of the greatest aspects of soldiering. We never take for granted an opportunity to learn and grow as an individual or a team. Thank you. Thank you for that very important lesson so early in our career, and thank you for trusting us. Now let's fast forward to present day. In my capacity as the Sergeant Major of the Army, a lot of what I do is attending and speaking at functions just like this, and frankly, it's one of my most favorite things to do. I learned so much from engaging and talking with real people than I ever would sitting behind my desk and looking at email and PowerPoint slides. And although a lot has changed in our Army over the years, systems, tactics, uniforms, and even our adversaries, our greatest asset remains the same. It's our people, our soldiers, their values, character, standards, and discipline, they remain resolute, I assure you. Their wonderful families stand by their side, and they are the gold standard for resiliency. And that's why we have, and we always will be successful. You should be proud. You should be proud and confident. Proud of the fact that your generation set the standard that has paved the way for the next generation to carry on the sacred traditions each and every one of you fought so hard for and prevailed. And confident in the fact that the soldiers today are doing just the same. Despite perceptions that may be out there about this generation, you know, the millennials, I can assure you they are just as committed, resilient, and ready to face the challenges of the complex world in which we live in. Now, I know what you're thinking. I know you are. But okay, they text a lot. I got it. And instead of going to the NCO club and having a beer, you know, they're on the internet. I got it. And instead of carrying their family photos in their wallet, they post it on what is called Facebook. For some of you in the room, you should check it out. It's actually pretty nice. Yeah. But here's the truth, and all of you have to admit it. If you had cell phones and internet back then, you would have too. That's right. But all they're doing is using the tools they have. And if we had the internet and the cell phones, we'd be using them too. Oh, and by the way, if I had the internet back then, and y'all would have sent me on that box of grid squares mission, I would have Googled it and told you all go to hell. But our soldiers today have earned, and I promise you they continue to earn their place in history as our nation's credentials. And much like we did following the Gulf War, our soldiers today fought hard, and they endured a drawdown in years of fiscal uncertainty. And until just this year, We've been reducing our force structure and sacrificing modernization and equipment due to fiscal restraints. But as we sit here this evening, over 182,000 soldiers from active Guard and Reserve are serving in distinction in over 140 countries. Ladies and gentlemen, let me repeat it, in over 140 countries. The standard battle rhythm for a U.S. Army soldier today is this: they deploy, they redeploy, they train, and they deploy again. A major deployment or a tour in combat is not something that you sit around and expect. It's something that's going to happen. These young men and women are confident, they're capable, and they're resilient. They're committed, and they have courage, unbelievable courage, and they are professionals. The soldiers of this generation are different, I'll give you that, but so were we, and so were the generations before us. The not-so-fond perception of America's youth, that stuff has been going on for generations and generations. You know, even back in the 1920s and 30s, that's when the term teenager was born. And I'd ask you to go look this up. That term, all right, was not used then as it is described today. So in the 1920s and the 1930s, they were coined teenagers because they were constantly fighting their parents for freedom, battling the parents over curfews, cigarettes, and swing music. I bet you're all familiar with that, aren't you? No. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that generation in the 20s and 30s, they did something in the mid-40s. And above everyone's expectations, they were declared the greatest generation that ever lived. A well-earned title as a result of their actions in both World War II and the years to follow. And today's no different. And throughout our history, we will continue to question the behavior of the generations that succeed us, and they will of theirs. I'm sure they will. But however, when asked to answer our nation's call, they are right now, and they will continue to answer it. I'm confident in this generation. Like those of the past, there's one thing I know true. They are not willing to sacrifice what your generation paved the way before them. Today in the United States of America, having a military is a requirement, but service in it is a choice by an individual. And not everyone in America chooses to serve, and that's okay. That's why we have our soldiers. And not everybody in America wants to serve, and that's okay. And there's some people in America that don't like soldiers or don't want people to serve. That's okay too. We fight for their right to say that. But ladies and gentlemen, most of you in this room and the soldiers that are defending us around the world, they chose to serve. So God bless you and God bless them. Many of you are in this room tonight, and many more are standing watch around the world so we can enjoy it. So as we close this evening, remember to think about the 180,000 soldiers that stand watch today, just like you did in 1991, standing watch in the desert, thinking about your families back home, but knowing the mission you had to accomplish. You did it. You accomplished it for our nation. You accomplished it for the future soldiers that we have today. And you did make America great. I want to thank each and every one of you for your service and your sacrifice to our nation and the things that you continue to do to keep the memories of our veterans alive. America has to know and understand how we got here. And you, ladies and gentlemen, are keeping that memory alive every day. So God bless our veterans. God bless the 7th Corps. God bless the United States Army. And ladies and gentlemen, God bless America. Army strong.
Sergeant Major, if I can ask you to come back up here one more minute, please. Well, first of all, Sergeant Major, let's take a selfie. Sergeant Major, get over here. All right. So turn our back. So
I told you if you had cell phones back then, you'd be using them.
Turn around, Sergeant Major. Turn around. We'll get so we can send it this way, Sergeant Major.
Oh, we got to do it this way.
Okay, now. Turn all
Got a car
about
on
face.
one side, Sergeant Major on the other side.
I don't know what to do.
About
Only
face,
my
Sergeant
wife
Major.
twists me around.
About face, Sergeant Major.
Mark's taking another
About face. So
we're doing
the
selfie
boss
this
can see everybody.
You need a tall guy to hold it.
There we go. On three, ready? 1, 2, 3. By the way, I'm used to the tall jokes, all right? Sergeant Major, we appreciate everything you do for us every day as the 15th Sergeant Major of the Army. And more importantly, we appreciate you coming out here, spending time with us tonight. And at that point, and now I'd like to have Sergeant Major present this to you.
And this meets the standards of conduct.